Welcome to Unapologetically Sensitive, where you can learn, relate, laugh, and maybe even live a bolder, brighter life. I'm your host, Patricia Young. This is a weekly podcast where we explore the strengths we have because of our sensitivity and some of the challenges it poses as well. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hey there. To the creatives, healers, sensitives, and deep thinkers, welcome. How are you? It's a fresh new year. How's it feeling? Today, I want to talk to you about attachment injuries. I've got some good ones for you. I have been going through some historical attachment injuries that are really intense. And I talked to many of you and you asked me about attachment injuries and how do we handle them and how do they show up in relationships. This is a good one. And it has to do with Jen, although it's not about Jen, it's the trigger. We were supposed to record today. We're going to record on Friday. I would love to do this with Jen, but I just wanted to commit to sitting down and recording today. And if we want to talk about it later with you. But everything that I have to say is amazing about Jen's part in this. The other thing that I'm going to do towards the end, although I sometimes forget, I want to give you an update on Melvin. I think it's episode 161 and 165. I want to bring you up to date on where I'm at with that. And I have a little bit of information about rolling, kayaking, and Pat, who helps me and is amazing. And then at the end, I'm going to let you know a little bit about registration starting for the next online HSP course, which will start, if you're listening to this the day it comes out, will start on January 11th, 2023. But let's roll back and talk about what's been going on with me around my attachment wounds. And part of what is important for you to know, and I'm reluctant to bring this up because my mom and I have done a tremendous amount of healing. So this is not about anything that she did wrong. If you happen to be friends with my mom, no need to mention this to her, only because, I don't want to cause her unnecessary pain and suffering. We've done a lot of healing work. But part of this is about when I was little, two things happened. My mom was a single parent, was very overwhelmed. And I was in elementary school and it wasn't uncommon for her to say she'd just get overwhelmed. She's an HSP too. And she'd say, I'm leaving. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know when I'll be back. And she would leave. I remember thinking, if something happened to my mom, who would take care of me? As a young kid, I was up until about the time I was 11. I thought, what if she doesn't come home? So that was one source of attachment injuries. I think I've told you that my dad left when I was 5. I didn't know that anything was going on. One day he packed up and he left. And so there's already some attachment injuries there. And then my mom's point of view was if she could just find a husband and a father, that would be a whole family. So her goal was to find the missing link of a father. What that looked like from my perspective was if she didn't have someone she was dating, I was kind of her surrogate partner. I was very competent, very capable. She counted on me. I kind of had that white knight syndrome that I can come in and swoop and fix and do all kinds of things, even as a kid. But then if she was dating someone and they didn't really like kids or didn't have a lot of room for me, then I was kind of relegated to whatever time and attention was left for me. Some of the people she dated really included me and I felt very loved and cared for. Other times, not so much. And again, this is not to disrespect or say anything negative about my mom. These are the facts of my history. So Jen and I tend to use the app Marco Polo. Sometimes we polo a couple times a day. Jen and I are at different stages in our life. We're different ages. My kids are grown and launched. She still has kids. She works more than I do. She has a lot of things that she shuffles and juggles much more than I do. And generally, that's very fine. But recently, Jen has this project that she's been working on with somebody else, and she hasn't been as available. And I've been okay with it. I knew that it was bringing up some of my attachment injuries, and I was aware and kind of rumbling with it. And because I knew that it didn't have anything to do with her, I was trying to manage it on my own. But the thoughts were there, feeling she wasn't as available. She wasn't showing up as much for poloing. And it was activating some of that feeling hurt, abandoned, not important. She's spending time with somebody else on this project. And I just kind of let it be okay. I may have talked about it a little bit. And then last Friday, I was aware that it was really coming up and I wanted to talk to her about it, but she was having a very hard day. And again, because of my history, if I'm in a relationship with someone, we both can't be having needs at the same time. And so I didn't say anything to her and I thought I was okay, but there was more time between our polos. I know many of you can relate to this, that when you reach out to somebody, you text somebody, you send them an email, you call them, and there's space before when they return to you. That can also activate a sense of trauma, abandonment, anger, hurt, frustration, loneliness. The next day, Saturday, so I'd been managing, but on Saturday, I just kind of fell off the ledge and things got pretty severe for me. And I didn't hear from Jen all day. And I just kept thinking, stay focused on what you're doing, focus on what's going on in your life. But I was really hurting. And then I think she texted me. And we have these young parts, and often our adult is on board, and sometimes our young part gets blended with that adult, and my young part was blended. And so when I got her text, I'm just like, screw you, I'm busy. I'm here all the time for you. You can count on me. I've been through some pretty hard things with you. I've been very present. You're not available. Now I want you to miss me. I'm not going to be as available, and I want you to miss me showing up for you the way I've been showing up for you. I'm not advocating that you do this, but I'm being very transparent about what went on for me. And then Jen sent me a polo via Marco Polo, and I was walking the dog, and I started to cry while I was listening to it. And she's also talking about the person she's doing this project on. And when I heard the person's name, like I'm not going to say the person's name, but I just heard like meh, and I'm doing something with meh. And that very young, jealous part felt like, how come meh gets all of your time and attention? And what about me? What about me? I'm feeling hurt and lonely. And because I really was, if you use internal family systems, the term is blended. So that young part that's going, meh, 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 was more in charge and blended than the adult part of me going, I'm feeling hurt and abandoned right now. This isn't about what's going on. I can talk to her about my feelings. And I just felt like there was no adult on board, yourself. There was no self. So I didn't know what to do. I cried a little bit while I was walking the dog, but I felt like if I responded, I didn't want to come from that young blended place where I was feeling hurt and angry and I didn't know what to do. When I got home, I did send a text that said something like, I'm having some attachment injuries coming up. I need some space. I'll connect with you tomorrow. And she responded, okay. And that was kind of the end of it. I was very quiet that day. I kind of just shut down. I think I felt this so much as a kid, but didn't have words for it. And I just was very internal. My husband kept saying, is everything okay? And I just didn't know what to do, but it felt like things were not okay in the world. So Sunday morning when I woke up, I texted Jen and asked, do you have time to talk? And she texted back, I can make time for you. And what I read was, I can't make time for you. So again, that's how this wounding shows up, of just almost expecting to be abandoned, not attuned to. And I've talked to you about, I have a relationship with somebody else who's also a therapist. And in the past, when we've tried to work through some of these wounds that I'm talking to you about, that they go with me to every relationship. So it's not like they're not going to show up in relationships that are close and intimate. It has not gone very well in this other relationship because this other person has their own stuff around my needs, what goes on with them historically. And so I also have this experience of feeling incredibly abandoned and rejected in another very close relationship where I tried to work some of this through. And my guess is that that's relatable to many of you as well. Now, Jen and I also have kind of a puzzle piece here, but what comes up for her is she wants to jump in and rescue and save me in that way that I was very competent with my mom and my relationship with her when she needed me. Jen also has that. So when I'm struggling, what Jen has to be careful of is not over-functioning and over-performing. But anyways, Jen was actually at a friend's house baking cakes with a friend and her kids, and she stopped and went upstairs, and we spent an hour on the phone. So, Jen is very committed to our friendship, to my well-being. And I told her what was going on, and I sobbed. That deep, deep, wounded sobbing that has nothing to do with today. So what's getting activated for me was triggered by this situation in the moment with Jen, but it's not about Jen. It's about my history and needing a place to do the healing and feeling work around that so that I can be present in my relationship with Jen and manage the feelings that are coming up in the moment. But it's not about this deep deep, painful wound. You know, when you cry so much that you just can't breathe? That is what I did. And I'd say for, I don't even know how long, but there was just a lot of sobbing and releasing and crying and wiping my eyes. And Jen was present for it all. And then I was able to talk about what was coming up for me and the jealousy that I was feeling when I'd hear this person's name that she's working on this project. It's like, and then I heard the name and I'm like, nah. When there's space when I'm not hearing from Jen, my head goes into that's because she's spending time with me and I'm not being a priority and it hurts. And how come I'm not important? How come I'm being left behind and now I'm being replaced just like I was in my childhood? And we were able to talk about all of this. Jen was able to stay incredibly present for me. And then part of what we talked about is the buildup that happened. And what I often hear many of my clients say is they don't want to have an outburst over something. And so they just kind of tuck it down, which is kind of during the week I was having these little rumblings and thought I could manage. But then on Friday, I was aware that it was worse and didn't want to take away from what Jen was going through. And then Saturday, I just, like I said, I feel like I just fell off the cliff. And so I liken it to kind of a pressure cooker that you have to let that little steam out as it comes up. Otherwise, there is going to be a meltdown, an explosion, a letdown. I also started out this conversation with Jen saying, I'm really concerned that I'm going to become blended. And I don't know how to do this. I want to honor my feelings, but I don't want to like act out something with you, which would mean that young part ends up speaking to Jen. You're not here for me. You're spending time with me. You're not available for me. You don't love me. You don't care. That's being blended. And the reality is Jen is just having a project with someone else and she was less available. But that the feelings that were coming up for me are not so much about Jen, but more about my history. Like I'm feeling like I'm not being articulate. I'm going to trust that you're going to understand what I'm saying. And so it was really beautiful that Jen affirmed that I was staying in my adult. Everything was very appropriate. And we talked about moving forward. What can I do? And it felt really scary for me to name in the moment when I'm having those feelings. But I thought I need to try and do things differently because if I keep doing the same thing, then chances are it's going to build up and then I'm going to fall off the ledge and have another meltdown, which if it happens, it's okay, but it's a lot of time. It's a lot of energy. And I asked Jen that day if she would be okay just checking in with me a little bit by text. She was still spending time with a friend. She had a lot of other things going on, and she did. And again, because of my history, I had a lot of big feelings. And then it's easy for me to sort of disconnect and forget, to just go about my day. And it is interesting that I really did feel a sense of relaxation, calm. I felt regulated. It was very intense. The crying and the sobbing was very, very intense, but there was kind of a settling in my body. And then Jen and I checked in during the day, which just, I felt really loved and cared for by her. The next day, it was very interesting because what got stirred up for me was this feeling of abandonment. And it felt like Jen and I had broken up. And I knew we were solid because I had this information that she took an hour away from her friend to spend time with me. And she said, if you need me, call me. I'm here for you. It was very, very clear that she was available. And as the day went by and she was not available to polo me, I'm on the West Coast, she's on the East Coast. It's not uncommon for me to wake up in the morning and have a polo from her, which I look forward to. And part of this attachment stuff is, and we've talked about this before, I look to see, has she been on polo? Did she polo me? Did she not polo me? Did she listen to my polo? That those are attachment seeking behaviors, which are not bad, but that loneliness was starting to set in. And I did polo her. I told her the feelings that I was having. It was very scary because based on my history, I kind of expected her to go like, I spent an hour on the phone with you yesterday, like, get over it, which obviously she didn't. I really tried to talk myself through it. And I knew that I just had the sense that no matter how much reassuring she did, and if she gave me a reality check of what's been going on for her, these feelings were just going to persist. I did ask for a reality check about was this too much and was so fearful that she would get mad, she would get overwhelmed, that I would be too much. And she'd be like, I can't process this with you anymore. And I was able to say on my polo, I've been experiencing this for a good 50 years plus, and just because we spend a little time talking on FaceTime and me crying is not going to heal it all in one time. So, really trying to name the fears, but also walk myself through it and kind of show up as my own parent. And then I think that night she responded to me. And when she was able to say, "You're not too much. I'm here for you. I've got you." Again, the tears just came because it was so healing, because I'm expecting that backlash of, "I've had enough. You need to stop this," which is not what happened at all. But I have to tell you, this feeling of existential loneliness, abandonment, just showed up throughout the whole day. And no matter what I did, it was there. And I went for this beautiful paddle on Monday morning, was out on the bay with Pat, had a great time, and was thinking people would envy the lifestyle that I have because I'm blessed. I've set up a schedule where I work in the afternoons. I can do water fitness in the morning. I'm out on the bay. I live in San Diego where it's gorgeous. And I felt incredibly lonely and abandoned. Both of those things can happen at the same time. So we continued to work through this, and Jen had more time to connect in the next couple days, but I continued to talk about what was coming up for me. And Jen said she was showing up for me more via Marco Polo. It wasn't coming from a place of hustle or overperformance, but it was coming from a place of, I care about you and I want to work a little bit harder so that you know that you matter. And this will help to repair some of this attachment stuff that was coming up for me. And then after about a day or two, I said, I think I'm okay. They they often say in 12-step programs, like, if you want to know what you're eating or drinking or drugging or boozing or spending over, stop doing it and it will come up. And I figured if Jen backs off a little bit and my attachment injuries come up, then I go, okay, so there's still some stuff that's there to heal. So we've done a little bit of adjusting, and it's interesting. Today she has not been as available. And, I check Polo to see, like, did she watch my Polo and is she there? But I'm not having that angsty pull of existential loneliness and abandonment. Like, I wish that she was here and I'm longing for that connection, but I'm not having that incredible pull. And I think I talked to many of you, many HSPs, maybe not you specifically, that there's such a fear of feeling our feelings and feeling like they're going to overwhelm us and we're never going to be out of them. And it's been really fascinating to see how I've moved through this. The other thing that's really important is, I think on Sunday, I was messaging with the friend that I told you in the past, we don't do really well around our attachment injuries. And I just said, I'm going through some stuff around my attachment injuries. And she's like, is there anything I can do for you? I'm like, yeah, can you come over and hold my hand for months? And then I thought, or could you just carry me around in a baby sling? And really, that's what that young part is needing. These attachment injuries are so incredibly powerful. And that's what we need is an adult. Not now when I'm, as much as I'd love to be carried around in a baby sling right now, would look incredibly funny. When we're young, we need that. We need to have an adult who's attuned with us, that will sit with us, that will comfort us, that will hold us, that will carry us around so that we get those needs met so that we can move on to the next thing. And when we don't get them, we become adults who want somebody to hold our hand for the next few months or carry us around as adults in a baby sling. Just naming that created relief. Like, that's the level of attachment and security that I'm needing. That's pretty intense. And I talked to Jen about it. And it's interesting. This is, again, not digging on anybody's capacity, but the friend who I've kind of had this challenge with my needs in the past because of their stuff, that they're doing some incredible healing in their life right now. Basically put a little heart response to my request about holding my hand or carrying me around in a baby sling. And when Jen and I talked about it, she really heard how much I have this young, deep need for connection and young nurturing. Allowing ourselves to have that, the thought, obviously no one's sitting here holding my hand and I'm not being carried around a baby sling. Allowing myself to have that thought and that wish acknowledges and honors that young part. I was talking with a client recently who hates the young parts of her that were not seen in her, that she just had to tuck away. And I remember when I first got in touch with, my younger parts, like, they hated me. They didn't trust me. They didn't want me to have anything to do with them. And I had to do a lot of work. It's been years, it's an ongoing process. But when we can work on developing that sense of trust and nurturing for ourselves, that I can be here for me, that's part of this really incredible, powerful, powerful healing. We'll see what happens. I may regress. I may get my feelings hurt again. I may have another sob fest. It may become too much for Jen. I mean, we just know that we're going to keep working through this together. But I'll tell you, it is so incredibly powerful to have somebody that you can do this kind of work with. And my hope is that if this resonates for you and you have attachment injuries, that you have a trusted friend, a therapist, a coach, somebody that you've built enough rapport with that you can do this healing work, because it is so powerful, so powerful. I think that's all I have to say about the attachment stuff. So let's move on to some other things. If you listen to, I'm pretty sure it's episode 161 and 165, where I talk about Melvin, and Melvin thought that I had shared something that he shared with me with a group of people, and I didn't. I went into a fawn response and said, "You're right. I'm sorry. Thank you for telling me." And then I realized that I didn't do it. And some of the ways that he communicated with me were problematic, and I felt really angry. I sent him a text, and he sent me a text back that just, whew, if you want to hear more, go back to 165. We happen to be part of this consortium, this group organization that I belong to. So I see Melvin on a regular basis, and I'm not willing to leave a place that I belong. So a couple times I go and I'm not sure if Melvin's going to be there. It's not uncommon for me while I'm driving there to start having these conversations with him in my head. And I think had I not done a lot of my own healing, I would probably say, like, I'm ruminating and I'm not letting things go. I have a different take on this. Because I had such a fawn response when he read our text to the group and left some things out, it just caught me off guard that I'm like, that is not going to happen again. And if for any reason he brings up any of this stuff, I am going to clap back so hard and tell him that he needs to stop and this is over. And so that's part of what this dialogue that goes on in my head, usually on the way to the event, and then it generally pretty much ends. So we had this event that I went to, and like I said, part of it is there's sort of this milling around where we're not very structured, and then there's a part where we're all in the same area focused on the same thing, which can be a little bit more uncomfortable. And then we went out for a meal, and it was just Melvin and two other people and myself. I was like, oh Lordy, how are we going to do this? The seating was, you could either sit on one side of the table or you could sit on the other side. And Melvin was sitting on one side. And so somebody sat across from Melvin. The next person sat next to that person. And I sat next to the other person. So three of us are on one side and Melvin was on the other side. I'm not going to be unkind, but as a woman, I think it's so easy for us to reflexively, hi, how are you? Go into this conversation that is not authentic. And for me, it would be lying to myself. I'm still upset. Here's the deal. Melvin is a very likable person. Melvin is very personable and he knows about a lot and he can be a really lovely person. And early on in our relationship, I asked a lot of questions. He was very encouraging, very supportive. I believe that Melvin believed that I shared this information. He did say, when I said, am I in trouble? And he said, kind of. He was angry and the way that he communicated to me was not skillful and had some problems with it. Had I not gone into a fawn response and said, let me think about it, and had gotten back to him, it may have turned out differently. And I'll tell you, if you cross me, you will see a very different part of me that is not who you see on this podcast. And I poked some stuff in Melvin that activated him, and we got to see that part of him. These are normal human responses. And because I was so angry and upset in the first two recordings, I really wasn't able to talk about this. And it's kind of nice. A friend of mine, Dara, who was on early on in the podcast, I was sharing about after one of these events where I saw Melvin and said, Melvin's actually a pretty likable, personable person. What Dara said that I appreciated is that healing happens when we kind of move out of those extremes with people and we're able to see, like, he's a likable, personable person. How I was treated, I'm not crazy about, but it's not an all or nothing thing. And that felt really, really nice to me. I just had another experience very recently where I showed up and Melvin was there. I mean, since this happened, I've been in this group a handful of times. Still had the rumblings before I went with the, I'm going to say, and I'm not going to stand for this. And, this isn't going to work. No confrontation. So I think that we can put this one to rest. And I feel really good I was very afraid to release the episodes talking about it. I was very, very frightened, and it really put me into a very disempowered place. And where I'm at now is I have a right to say what I want. I'm very clear that this is not about anybody knowing who Melvin is. This is not about making Melvin into a bad person. I do have some feelings about the communication, which I've expressed. And many of you have reached out to me and told me how much this has impacted you and about the Melvins in your life. This is part of how we do healing. And this is what my intention is for this podcast. It's not to call anybody out. It's not to dox anybody and say who they are. I really want to respect people's privacy. And we struggle with this stuff. And this is why I talk about it. So that's that. Then the final thing I want to talk to you about is I kind of stalled on the rolling my kayak, that I just hit a point where I was fearful. It wasn't working. I didn't know what to do. And I just didn't want to do it. And I let that be okay. And then Pat and I went out a week ago, Friday and Saturday, for about 2 hours each day. Now, in retrospect, we've decided that if we do skills practice, we're going to do no more than 30 minutes at a time, because I end up getting really exhausted. And it is winter here in San Diego. It's obviously not as cold as it is in other places in the world. And I have neoprene pants on. I've got a splash jacket. Pat lent me a diving hood because I get water in my ears and it's uncomfortable. But I am so close to rolling. I am so close. And it's funny that we put a paddle float on the Greenland paddle, and I could flip the boat upside down with hardly any air in the paddle float. I was able to flip the boat up correctly. And then as soon as we took the paddle float away, I couldn't do it. It's psychological. It's a total psychological block. And it's been chilly and I have not wanted to get in the water. I trust that I'm going to get it when I get it. And it felt so nice to be as close as I got. And then it's funny, Pat sent me some videos and it showed people in there. It's called a jive. It's a very short kayak that's used for whitewater kayaking, and talks about getting comfortable in your kayak. And so it showed these people in their little jives upside down in the pool, having races and I started to watch it and I got so dysregulated. I had to stop, and I told Pat, and he's like, okay, but watch them when you can. So I did watch them the other day and they were very good. And I really do wish I had a pool that I was able to practice in, but we're getting closer. Pat also has a fiberglass kayak that he got. He's going to bring it for me on Friday. I paddled Monday, today, paddling Friday, and then there's a memorial on Saturday. So that's a lot of paddling for me this week. But he's going to bring this fiberglass kayak that he's selling. It'll be interesting to try it out. It's a different kind of boat. I have to be much more careful. I have scrapes on the bottom of my plastic boat from running over rocks when we've done these paddles downtown and in lakes. You can't do that with a fiberglass boat. But I went through a period of time where I just thought paddling is stupid. I don't want to do this. I'm too tired. And I just allowed that to be, and I rode it through. And this morning we went out to the ocean, and I was so looking forward to going out to the ocean. We saw dolphins. It's magical. So my intention in sharing this with you is, if you go through periods where you hate your job or your relationship or parenting or, whatever it is that you're doing, if what you're doing is not safe, it's toxic, it's dangerous, don't stay. But I'm saying it's very, very normal for us to go through these periods. I stopped practicing rolling for a while. Like, I don't want to, it's too hard. I can't get over my fear. Can you trust yourself to ride through that and know that you will circle back to it if you were meant to be, and that you can do things in your own time, in your own way? You don't have to do it the way everybody else is doing it, and you will do it when you're ready. And it's hard sometimes. I want to compare that, I'm not as courageous as other people and things scare me, and you just got to do what you got to do. Oh, and another thing, because I've been meeting Pat at the docks where I usually launch from the beach, I'm able to get into my boat off of the dock, but I really have been having a hard time getting out of my boat, and somebody has to secure it. You basically pull up next to a cleat and you hold on to it. You scoot your bottom to the back of the boat, and then you need to pull the boat back with your legs and stand up and then get onto the dock. And for some reason, I cannot pull my boat back. The boat wants to go out. I want to push the boat out. And obviously, if you push the boat out too far and you're not on the dock, guess where you're going to fall? The water. So it's like I need a babysitter. I need someone to spot me and hold the boat in case I push it out too far. And because we paddled, there were 10 of us this morning that went out to the ocean. I was asking people, what do you do? I watched people get out of their boat, and then somebody spotted me. And I did get out of my boat, and nobody had to hold it. Still not super confident. But this is just, I've had this boat for over a year now. I've had it for 11 months. There's always more stuff to learn how to do, and it's okay. It's okay to be a beginner. People have fallen in the water off the docks. Like if that happens, that's okay too. So are you giving yourself permission to learn to do the things that you want to do, or are you in a place where the fear is just holding you back? And if you're not ready, that's okay. Resistance is not a bad thing, but what I would encourage you to do is to talk about the resistance and what the fear is. I don't want to do it. I don't want to fall in. I don't want to look like a fool. I don't want somebody to have to hold my boat. Can you talk about what you're afraid of or what you don't want to happen and just acknowledge it and let it be okay? That is how we work through resistance. Just naming what that resistance is and knowing that you don't have to change it is all you have to do. Learning to embrace all parts of us, the scared parts, the frightened parts, the anxious parts, the angry parts. All of your parts are okay. So I think that's all that I have. I do want to let you know that registration for the online HSP course starts tomorrow, January 11th. Early bird registration will run from January 11th through January 17th. Regular registration will run January 18th through January 25th, and the classes will go from February 6th through April 17th. There's no class on February 20th. We are going to hit daylight savings time, so that's going to be an important factor because the time will change while we have class. If you don't know anything about the classes or you want more information, you can go to unapologeticallysensitive.com, go to I think it's this HSP groups. What my experience has been with these groups is you can talk about anything that's going on in your life. And I think so many people have not had the experience of talking about what they go through and have other people go, oh my gosh, I have that, I go through that same thing. And bringing challenges that you're having in your life to groups so we can talk about it, problem solve, get feedback from other people. These groups are incredibly powerful. We talk about perfectionism and boundaries and turning your perceived weaknesses into superpowers and communication, authenticity, vulnerability, self-care is non-negotiable, mindfulness, creating a lifestyle that honors the HSP. So there's a tremendous amount of information that you get in video every week that's in an email with additional things if you want to do them or additional resources. But the time being with other HSPs is incredibly powerful and valuable. Some of the groups have gone on to continue to meet after the course is over. Some of them haven't. It just depends on who's in the group, if someone's willing to initiate it. But my wish for each and every one of you is that you become empowered HSPs that thrive in your life. Does that mean you have a perfect, beautiful life? No. But it means that you have support, you have tools for working through discomfort and dysregulation. You have a sense of what you're thinking and feeling and needing, and you are finding ways to communicate that you can create a lifestyle that works for you and really thrive as an HSP. So if that sounds interesting to you, I would love to have you. I love doing these groups. I love meeting everybody. I think that's all I have, y'all. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're enjoying the new year. Remember, sensitivity is nothing to apologize for. It's your superpower. Have a blessed day.